to sunlight.
Look at this thing.
The Hummer EV. Redneck Physics.
Hey everybody, today we're going to talk briefly about what is the difference between a CV joint axle that you can rebuild, the ones where you can hammer off the CV joints, and the ones that you cannot rebuild, where if your boot goes bad or your CV joint goes bad or your bar goes bad, none of it can be separated from any of the rest of it and you're just stuck and you have to buy an entirely new CV joint axle. So what's the physical difference? First, let's really quick define some terms. We've got our CV star. The star goes onto the bar, and then these balls that ride in this cage basically go inside of these grooves in the star. They catch in the cage, and then additionally they protrude outward so that they can ride in the cup. So the cup is the big part, and so those balls are going to be pushing into that cup as well. So basically when the bar moves, it's splined to the star, and then the star is grooved with those big grooves into the balls. Then the ball carries the cage along there, and then the balls also connect through to the cup. So everything's brought together, and then you can have that rotation, and you can also have rotation at an angle, which is the beauty of a CV joint, up to approximately 45 degrees. Misalignment of the axis formed by the middle of this cup to the axis formed by whatever your drive shaft is. So about 45 degrees of misalignment, while you can still transmit rotational motion. So that's what a CV joint is, but what's the difference between one that can be rebuilt and one that cannot be rebuilt? Really hard to notice. So first of all, what is catching when you're trying to hammer off a CV joint? Vast majority of times, basically what's happening is on the end of the bar, you have a little groove and a spline, and you have a snap ring like this. So these round snap rings are supposed to be able to compress when this star slides back off, but they're not supposed to let the star come off the bar too easily, or else you'd have axles falling apart while you were driving. That would be bad. But they should be able to come off if you push really hard or hammer really hard, and basically it should compress once it hits those splines enough to where it's no longer larger than the outer diameter of these splines. So how do you know for sure it's going to compress? Well, it's about exactly how you make the geometry at the end of this spline. So hopefully you can see enough detail of what you really need to see, but basically, see how there's a little bitty buttered edge or mushroomed edge on the edge of these splines? That's like the entire key difference. The slope, the angle of these splines, and whether you have that little bitty buttered edge right there is the difference of whether or not this snap ring will be able to compress. If we look at one that's not rebuildable, you can see that it's pretty much just, it's a shallower angle, so the edge of those splines are almost just like a drop off as opposed to slightly angled inward. And you see those splines just end. There's no like partially buttered section for that spring to be able to start to compress. And honestly, there's a few other ways that things can go wrong, such as if you take off and on these snap rings and they get really bent out of shape and they don't, they're way too big to where like one end is completely outside and can get caught really easily. If you rebuild them too many times, that can also happen to where no matter if your spline is correct over here or not, as far as being chamfered enough, it's still going to catch and not compress. But when it really comes down to it, the OEM manufacturers just decide not to put that tiny little fillet on the edge of these splines, and so you can't rebuild most OEM axles. Some you can, but a lot you can't. And aftermarket companies that want to be nice to you just put that slight more angle on the end of their splines to where that snap ring can recompress and come back through. And they also may put a little bitty buttered edge right there to help that process. And that's really the only difference. It's really lame It's not that a lot of these OEM CV joints and some of the aftermarket CV joints aren't as good even. It's just that they literally don't do that tiny little chamfer, so when you break anything, including your boot, you have to replace the entire thing. Yeah, it's pretty lame. There's a lot of other versions of CV joints and a lot of ways that they're retained and stuff. But by and large, this is just a good example of that's all it takes to be the difference between a rebuildable and a trash throwaway as soon as anything breaks axle.